Cool. So we're going to talk about using Recoil JS in React to act as a state management system. Um, Brief overview: state management system in this context means that instead of keeping our data in like the state of a component, probably the root component, and then kind of passing it down. And if we need to filter it down to components down here, we can pass stuff through. And if there's things that don't use it, and just pass it through. That wiring is tricky, and passing callbacks to other things that go back up. Um, it works, and that's fine. It's a little bit fiddly, and especially if your application gets bigger than like a lab, you're not going to want to have to do that because if you move a component from here to here, you're going to have to pull out all that wiring and rewire it back in. So, uh, what a state management system like Recoil or Redux or MobX or any of those work is that they conceptually they have like a data store that sits kind of next to your application, and then your application can call to it, setting and getting from any component without having to do the wiring. In practice, what it means is that it's usually something that wraps your entire application, and when you wrap it, it kind of automatically sends tendrils down into every component and gives you some way to fiddle with it. In Redux, it uses like kind of like a messaging system. You can dispatch messages to get things or set things. I love Redux. I think Redux is a really good system. It is a little bit complex, I think, unless you're already into it. And there's a lot of kind of setup data working at all. So I usually start these days with Recoil. And so Recoil is a state management system that you wrap your application with, and it gives you a bunch of hooks to access those states. So it kind of gives you hooks that you're used to, kind of the same flavor as the useState hooks, getters and setters. You can actually use hooks that only give you a getter or only give you a setter. And there's a couple of cool other things. And really, the only setup is creating what they call atoms, and those are basically the states that will exist in your state management system, whatever you want to call it. So you can't just like willy-nilly throw stuff in there. Other ones work differently, but this one's pretty simple to set up. So um, let me just go into an example. And oh no, do I not have the the whole thing? Maybe is there a solution? Great. Uh, Stash checkout. Fantastic. Cool. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and share. And what we're going to look at here is the hide the controls there. Great. We're going to look at our old friend Sushi Saga. So we did a walkthrough of this. It's a fine little example. I think I'm just using the built-in solution here, not mine, unless I did mine and saved it. But they should be pretty much the same. Yeah, that's all pretty standard. Not exactly the way I did it, but close enough. So, um, so what do we have here? We've got our API. We've got it's setting it up with a use effect. So when the application loads, it's going to hit the API, then get that JSON. And oh, you don't really need to do that, but that's nice that it does that. That's going to set that state in there. So our application is working, and if that's from before, great. If everything is behaving, we should have in our app, here's our state of sushis. And we can see that is, sorry, that is passed down to our sushi container. Our sushi container, that's where it's clicking the state. Cool. Is passing down sushi components. Sushi components. There's that map. Oh, this is a little bit different than I wanted. Yep. And then handle click more down there. I feel like there's a different one that we did that had a deeper nesting of stuff, but we can still do this here. So it'll be less dramatic here, I think. But let's table, wallet, great. There's our plates, eating sushis. Interesting, interesting.
I think it was plants.
Was it the plants one? Let's
Because
look
you
at
had
that. Because
put
that's
the plants propped in, and then you had to put
yeah,
it in again, and then
you're
That's
right.
3 times.
yeah.
Yeah. This one is this is still a great one, but I don't think it's gonna be as dramatic as the plants one. Oh boy, where's my plants? That one, there we go. All right, let's code that one up. Close out. Bye, Sushi. Well, that up there. Cool. I don't need this one here. Bye, Sushi served as well. Let's go ahead and did it give us a two? Yeah, great. So server npm start. And hopefully fancy. There we go. Great. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. This is the one that I did. Cool. So let's take a look at what we have here. Yeah. So we have our app. We are fetching our plants, setting our plants here. And then we are passing the plants down to the plant page. The plant page is passing plants down to the plant list. And the plant list is passing each plant down to each card. Great. And then back up top, I don't think the header did anything right. But the plant page did have the search. Yeah, and that just sets that. Great. Cool. So let's take a look at what we need to do to get this hooked up with Recoil. So right now, this is passing our data down through a couple components. So ideally, what would be cool would be if we just had the application load our data, and then I think maybe the only thing we would want to pass through here is a search term, and then we can do our stuff down here. So let's take a look at what that looks like. And so we're going to need to do a couple things here. First off, we're going to need to install um, uh, install our thing. What is I getting there? Yeah. So in our package JSON, we don't have any Recoil stuff installed. So we're just going to npm install Recoil. I think it's just Recoil, not Recoil JS, right? Yeah, that's good. And here we have our Recoil installed. So now we can start using it. And whenever I'm using something like that, oh, this doesn't have a strict on it. I'm usually going to wrap it in the index because it really doesn't and this is again a matter of taste, I think. In our components themselves, I just want that to be like the main functionality. So if I have stuff like the strict, which is not in here for some reason, or wrapping it with recoil or react or redux or whatever, I'm usually going to put it up top here. So to do that, I'm going to import some stuff from Recoil, and I'm gonna put it in here. So the thing I want to wrap it with is called it's called Recoil Root, and so we need to actually import that. I'm gonna get Recoil. This is about Python, so we're going to import up here. Cool. And so I'm going to import Recoil Root right here. Great. And so this gives me a component. That's a component that we can use. So I'm going to wrap our app with that. And this is what we were talking about before. So our app is all of our main stuff. Recoil root is just a component. And what it does is it takes a look at the child component inside of it, in which our case is app. And it does a bunch of stuff to it, basically to inject these hooks so that we can use those hooks in there. Cool. So that's that. And that's really all there is to that. What we need to do next is set up so Recoil uses a thing called atoms. And atoms are basically us telling Recoil what pieces of state we want to keep track of. So we can't just do arbitrary ones. How does it do that? Well, it does that by using another thing we can import, Atom. We're not going to import it here, though. We're going to import it in where we're going to do it. We're going to need to do it in, oh, yeah. We could do it here, actually. I prefer to put it in a separate file called let's call it lib. If I'm writing custom hooks or extra data manipulation things or libraries, I usually put them in a folder called lib, and I'm going to call this one atoms.js. So this is something that's going to get picked up by React and compiled, hopefully, I think. Is that right? Maybe. We'll find out. And so here I'm just going to need to import the same thing. I'm going to need to import Atom from Recoil. So this should give me access to this function called Atom, which is kind of hooked in through the whole Recoil system. And so again, an atom is just a piece of state I want to keep track of. And in this case, plants seems like a good atom to have. So I'm going to create an atom by using I'm going to call it plants. Plurals are hard. Plants state. Plants atom. Plants atom. Yeah, I'll call it plants atom. Yeah, that sounds good. And so I'm going to use that atom, which is a function. Hey, look, atom function. And so what this function does is it takes an object, and that object is going to have basically two things in it. It's going to have a key, and I can use whatever I want here as long as it's unique. Normally, I like to call it what it's called, so I'll just call it plants atom. And then a default value. And for that, since our data here is going to be a list, I'm going to give it an empty list by default, the same as we're giving the use state an empty list there. So format that and save it. Cool. That's how you set up an atom. If you ever looked at the Redux stuff in our curriculum, this is way easier than setting up our reducer and dispatcher and all that stuff. So now we're ready to use Recoil. So how do we actually use this whole thing? So we don't need a use state anymore here anymore. I think what I'm going to do is use recoil state. And so now we're importing recoil state up here from recoil. And so instead of using a regular state, we're using recoil state. And that means we are, instead of keeping our state local to this component, this state is going to be kept in the global atom store. And I need to give it something here, but I'm not going to use a default variable here. What I'm going to do is give it the atom itself that is going to be hooked into. And I'm going to need to import that. So we called it plants atom. It's not going to do it automatically for us. So I need to import plants atom.
Do you need to export it as well?
I believe you're right. Yeah, I do. I do. I do. I do. I do. From lib. Yep. Export. There we go. And I'm going to export it by name. So if I have a bunch of atoms, they're each going to be exported by name, so I can just grab them from the ones that I need. This is from back one directory. There we go. Atoms. Cool. Is this gonna work for us? Save. Plants atom is not found in the map. Plants lowercase p, right? Yeah. There we go. Plants atom is not defined. There we go. Hey, cool. Now we can get rid of use state from in here. Boom. No more use state for us. Dependency. Use plants. Set plants. Yeah, that's not bad. So now this is going to behave just like a regular state. And maybe it'll work just the way it does without me changing anything here. Yeah. So cool. Just replacing that state in the app. We can still use it just like our regular state. Like we can pass it down if we want to. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. But we don't have to anymore. So plant page is no longer getting plants passed down. And so I'm not going to be getting it anymore. And I'm not going to pass plants to plant list here. I am going to need to pass down the search term. So let's do that. Yeah. Great. And I probably wouldn't do that in the actual app, but I want to do it here just for demonstration purposes. Cell plant. Oh, there we go. Cell plant equals cell plant. Cool. So now we're not passing plants down at all. And if we look at plants list, we're not getting plants from here either. So where are we getting plants? I'm just going to paste this down here for a second to keep that tiny. Great. So where are we getting plants from? We're going to get it from Recoil. We are going to, again, import our atom. Our plants atom. And look at that. We're going to import our plants atom, and then we're going to use it to create a selector here. So we could say use the recoil state again. Instead, I'm going to do it with a recoil selector. So I'm going to say const plants, no brackets, recoil state selector, recoil value. That's what it is, recoil value. I'm going to give it our plants atom. So now, instead of getting us a getter and setter, because we don't need to set the value down here, we're just going to get that value, and we're not passing it through anywhere in between. So now I'm just going to throw our, we needed to pass out our search term here. Or do we? I'm going to add this filter to our map there. So our plant name starts with search term lowercase. Great. Is this going to explode? Possibly. No explosion yet. Hey, look at that. Everything works. Fantastic. And so now we're not passing plants down. We are setting plants here in our app, but we don't need to actually pass it down to do the stuff. And now if we want to, since this state isn't just local to the app, we can mess with these. So let's look at our let's do cell plant because that's the we'll do both of them. Why not? I don't want to have to pass cell plant down. Boom. I'm going to grab this function, and so now this is cleaned up a little bit. Where were we selling plant before? In plant page and plant list, and we're look at this. We're passing cell plant down to plant page. We're passing that down to our plant list. And our plant list, we're getting it here, and we're passing it down to each plant. I don't feel like doing any of that. But what I am going to do is go to our plant card. I don't need to grab it there either. I can just put my function there. And now it's going to call that function directly. So that means I need to grab my atom in here again. Import plants atom. And I'm going to grab the recoil state in here. Set plants. And so now instead of passing those things through like 4 components, it doesn't need to be up here. Where I'm doing the action, where I'm in each card, where I'm clicking the thing, that's where it's doing that logic. And that's where it's changing the state. And am I lying? Who knows? Let's find out. Hey, look at that. And now it works. So this is the other super powerful thing about this is that we not passing the state down is really nice. Not passing all these little functions down to do all these things. Oh, so nice. In fact, let's go ahead and grab the other one. Add new plant. So now we don't need to pass that into our plant page. And first off, now this is what our app looks like. There's not a ton of functions in there to mess with stuff. There's just, here's the header, here's the plant page, not even passing anything down at all. And since we don't need to add new plant here, we don't even need to take props down. We don't need to pass that to the new plant form. We don't need to add new plant here. We can drop our add new plant function in here. And since it is doing set plants of plants, we do need to grab our atom. And we do need to plant. Why do we do that there? I forget. Oh, that's our plant form, right? And so now we're using our recoil state in here instead of the stuff that we're passing down, and passing stuff down there. That doesn't need to know about it. So we're just, this is all the stuff we had before. We just moved our add new plant thing into the form that is actually adding the plant. And now that should just work without having to pass anything down. Plant API is not defined. Ooh, plant API is not defined. Well, maybe that is something else. We can do that. So in the sushi example, I made a little custom hook to handle our API. But if we want to, we can put that in Recoil too. API item. I'll give that a key of API item. And we'll just give it a default value, which is our actual API here. So that's that. And now we're only really reading this, so we never need to do the recoil state. We can just do the recoil value. So we can say and did I export that? Yeah. And that gets imported up here. And so now, oh yeah, I'm saying we don't even need plants here because we're not reading plants. So instead of using recall state, we can say set plants equals use recoil set state. Use recoil set value. What is it? Recoil set. What is it? Recoil. Use set recoil state. That's what it is. Yeah. So we're just going to use our plants add for that. And so now this cleans us up even more since we're not reading the plants state in here anywhere. We're only setting it with the fetch. We don't need to get both of them. We can say, hey, look, and this improves readability because we can say in this app, reading from top to bottom, oh, we are only setting the plants and we are only reading the API. And then we're using that and using that. And then the structure of our application is just the JSX. We're not passing any values or callbacks or anything down there. And then if we are using our don't need recall state there. If we are altering stuff with the API later on, like in our new plant form, we can just say boom, like that. And now that is available wherever we need it. We don't need to pass it through. And don't know what that is. We'll find out. Hey, there it is. There's another one. And that works if we reload. It's still there. Cool. So that is a whirlwind tour of Recoil. Again, we can do all this stuff with state. If you don't feel like learning Recoil or any of the other things, totally fine. But it's gonna make your life a lot easier, especially since you don't have to think about where that data is going to live, where it needs to get passed down to, where I need to pass callbacks down through. it's easier to, and you've probably already started this in your project, but on a new project, it's much easier to say like, oh, here's the structure of my thing. I'm gonna pass this down here. I'm gonna need a search term, but do I need? Oh, I don't need search term down here. I could put my search term in Adam too if I wanted to. I'm not gonna do that right now, but that would clean up these. I'd just say plant form, search, and plant lists. And then each of these is where I'd set the search term in recoil state. So it really makes everything a lot more modular. And then if I wanted to, like, I could do that right now. Can I? Let's go ahead and do this. Well, I don't know if I want to do that. So the search, so the reason we had the search term up here in plant page, it doesn't really feel like the search term should be part of the plant page, but we needed to keep it there because that's where our state is. But if we add a new atom, search atom, and it's going to default to an empty string, I guess. Now, plant page doesn't seem like the right place for this. It's only here because these two are its children and they need to talk to each other. So plant page doesn't need that at all. Search doesn't need that there at all. That doesn't need there at all. What we can do then instead in search, we can say we're only setting the search term in search. So we're going to say const set search term equals use set recoil state, and we're going to use our search atom that we're importing up here. So now that just works with the atom, and we don't need to pass that down into this. And then in our plant list, that doesn't need to get passed in. Oh, in fact, let me grab that out of our. We don't need to pass that in there. Look at how clean this is. We don't need to pass in the search term. We can just grab it from there. So now this plant page, again, this is our structure. We don't need to worry about wiring stuff up or passing stuff through. All we know is, hey, the new plant form is there, the search is there, the plant list is there. Great. And then search does the same thing. And then before I start shooting my mouth off, let's make sure it still works. Hey, it still does. Great. So instead of passing that search term down from, honestly, a place where it didn't belong, we can just look at the structure here, and then inside that, we can use that state. And inside the plant, we can use that. Now, this is really important because I don't feel like search belongs in the plant page. So instead of that, I'm going to put it in the header, which currently has nothing. So I'm going to put the search thing right there. I still need to import it. Where is it? Is it here? Search. Oh, dot search, right? Dot search. Cool. So now our search is in the header. I don't need to rewire it. I don't need to make sure that the header and the plant list have a common parent. I don't need to bring all of those props and make sure they're passing the right thing to the right thing and passing the right callback to the right callback. I can just move that search bar up there. And it works without rewiring. And if your app is more complicated than this, that is going to be huge, because if you have, a header with a section with a button that you click, and then somewhere down there you have your main page with a product list with a product thing with something that the button affects, instead of wiring and rewiring. And then if you want to move something around, pulling it all apart and putting it back, all you need to do is tell it, hey, change that state in the place. And this is kind of like the closest, like the proximity principle again. Like, we want this near where it's being used. We don't want this 3 levels up where stuff is passed around, and that, plant page doesn't have to worry about, oh, these 2 things are children that just happen to use this piece of data, so I need to keep that up here. None of that. So that's the cool part about that. The other thing is kind of the stuff I was talking about way back when we started talking about state, is that, those aren't like the search term, like that's not necessarily part of the state of this. That's data that's important somewhere. But it really doesn't tell us anything about that besides, what's in there. So it really helps us distinguish between like what's actually state of the component, like is this component hidden or not, what's in this form field, what's the style, dark or light mode, as opposed to the data that we're working on. And the data is, we're keeping it in our recoil atoms. And there's a super simple way to set it up. There are fancier things you can do with it. You can customize it a lot to do some fun things, but I think it's really simple, and it makes everything so much easier. Look at this. So that is my big speech on recoil. What questions do we have about this?
Kind of wish we covered this yesterday, because this was exactly what I was struggling with. So I had a search bar, and I needed to be a child of of this one app, and like the data was over here, and I was like,
Yeah, I really wish we would cover this alongside state, but for some reason it's tacked on. And this one isn't even tacked on. We use Redux, which, believe you me, is an order of magnitude more difficult to set up to achieve the same thing. I still love it. But yeah, but fortunately, this is not the last time you'll be building a React application. You'll be building at least 2 more for projects. So you can do this from the start there. And this lets you, when you're making your wireframes, all you really need to do is concentrate on where stuff is and not how it's wired up. That's a nice plus. What other questions? Feeling pretty good. I am. I really enjoy this because it just cleans up a lot of stuff that we kind of assumed. Yeah, nice. Cool. Last call for questions before we shut it down. Cool. I'll post this up with all the other videos in the usual places. But otherwise, yeah, give me a holler if you have any questions about anything. I'm happy to talk about it at length. Clearly. Cool. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see y'all after lunch for blogs.